Welcome to the EntailAI podcast, discussions with marketing executives sharing the latest techniques for growing their businesses online.
Hello and welcome to Intel Podcast, where we interview tech leaders in the B2B and B2C industries. And today I have the pleasure of having with me Dirk Nicol, who is a leader in emerging tech companies, previously IBM and IOHK. Hi, Dirk. Very nice to have you on board.
Hey, Tom. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining. Dirk, before we start, maybe you want to take a minute and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Dirk Nicol. I have been in the tech industry for quite a while in a variety of different roles, from engineering, product management, product marketing, and was with IBM for a number of years, kind of going through many of the big tech transformations from PCs, the client server, internet, Java, Linux, Web 2, cloud, and most recently blockchain, where I've spent some time in the fintech space, a variety of different roles, and how blockchain is used within industries and supply chains and so forth. And along the way, I've got a bunch of patents. So it's been a good ride, and I've enjoyed my time in the emerging tech space and looking forward to sharing with the community here some of my experiences.
Okay, great. I'm very excited, and I have a few questions that come up already.
Wow.
I mean, I can tell you, I've invested in crypto, a few years back. It's a pretty good time now in terms of, Bitcoin and then the price of Bitcoin and so on. But in general, there was a lot of hype around crypto and blockchain in general. Do you still believe it has like a significant place in fintech and in general?
Oh, definitely. I think the blockchain technology is a kind of fundamental shift in the way we look at transactions and how to do distributed systems. I think as you kind of see how the blockchain, like with any emerging technology, some of it will kind of go mainstream, some of it will not. I think some of the technologies to watch in the blockchain space are things like zero knowledge proof technology, that it allows you to understand a state of perhaps somebody's credit score or their identity without actually getting that information. So that's very powerful. And also distributed identities is another technology that I think will become really important, particularly in enterprise, in allowing individuals to control their own data as opposed to having it distributed through the network through single sign-on and so forth. So I think there's going to be a lot of technologies that will come out of the blockchain era that will continue to become fundamental to the whole tech industry.
So it's not just about currency and about fintech in general, right? It's more about the security of how to store data and how companies can leverage that.
I think that's an important part of the technology trend. Yeah.
Do you think AI now is going to change any of that? Especially in terms of because a lot of it is about really securing data, cryptography, and so on. And AI opens up, a new set of ways of using AI, and some of it can also be maybe to kind of like break the code. No,
I think certainly AI is a fundamental. Yet another one of these tech trends that are fundamental shifts. Like I've been talking about, how it seems like every few years is a new tech shift in the market that will forever change the way we do technology going forward. I think AI is another one of those technologies that will, and it's already fundamentally shifted and impacted pretty much everything we do. I think one of the big areas that is the allocation of VC funding. I think a lot of the VC funding has now shifted over towards AI, and in a limited supply of funds, some technologies will get less than they were in the past. So I think that's one big shift. I think that as you mentioned, there's certainly things we need to keep an eye on around security and how you can leverage that AI to do things you couldn't do in the past by leveraging the machine learning and the efficiencies that come about as a result of the AI technology. But I think a lot of it yet to be seen. And I think part of that will with any new technology, we'll have to think about regulations as associated with that. How do we use this new technology? We're all learning about it. It wasn't just about was it November of last year that ChatGPT came out that really allowed everybody to see the power of the technology. And now we're starting to think about, well, how does that technology really work? Where does that data come from? Who has copyright access to that, copyright authority over that technology and the content that it uses? So I think there's a lot of open questions, a lot to be learned as we kind of go through this new trend.
Yeah. By the way, ChatGPT is already like November of like the previous year, so 2022, not 2023. So it's been around for almost a year and a half now. Yeah. I can tell you, I mean, about our company Intel, that we've been pretty obsessed with, how AI is changing the market, because we're around content and marketing, and it's one of the industries that is mostly affected by that. It is affected quite a lot because of the hype, not necessarily or really because of what you can do with that. I can tell you that, we're called IntelAI, and when we speak to other companies or prospects, when they hear the word AI and content, they're more afraid of us being like, they always ask, do you create content with AI, or how do you use AI? Because they're more worried about you creating content with AI, even though, considering all the hype. For us, that's not necessarily how it affected the market. I mean, we were very worried with how it's going to affect Google search and so on. And we developed a lot of innovation around that, quite different than other companies. But I mean, that brings me more to like the topic of this conversation about innovative growth strategies. And maybe like you can outline in general, companies that you worked for and industries that you were involved in. I mean, what type of like, I can tell about myself, I'm more, I lean towards growth strategies that are more organic or have to do with growth hacking, like developing our own technology and so on, rather than paid channels or, the mainstream channels.
Right.
So maybe you can speak a little bit about yourself and about your experience in that space.
Well, I think innovative strategies are something that if you're in the tech industry, you've got to continue to stay focused on that, because things are constantly changing. You have to stay ahead of the competition. Customers' needs are constantly changing. New markets open up, like blockchain or AI, like we're just talking about. And then, if you don't keep up, you're going to be behind. Just from my sort of experience over the years, you can really see how when new technology trends came along, first mover advantage was a big, really helped, right? It really allowed you to differentiate. But at the same time, there have been technology trends that haven't panned out. And so if you're too early, you miss out. So this is where I think staying really close to your customer, understanding what their needs are, what are their jobs that they need to get done, and think about creative ways of how to solve them, and leveraging the latest technology trends to do that.
And so you've been involved mostly in B2B, right? And also in products. So what growth strategies do you think are more suitable for to drive growth through product development?
What type of projects? Well, I think that there's a set of different ways to think about growth, right? There's a product side of it. And certainly companies like Apple are great examples of a company that really is product focused. I think there's also a geographic innovation, expanding markets, sort of something like Netflix has done, started in the US and expanding globally. There's brand innovation. I think one example of that is like Liquid Death. If you ever seen that water, I mean, it's just water in a can. What's the advantage of that? But they've really done some innovation around branding and, tapping into what's cool, exclusivity, and so forth. And then I think there's partner innovation. You could see that with like Stanley Cups and Target, how you can create special brands, combining the two that make it exclusive and make you feel like you're missing out if you don't have it. And then there's you have a particular strength within your organization, then expanding to adjacent markets. I think that's something that like Amazon has done with, started out as a retailer that moved into AWS, leveraging some core strengths that they have. And then there's organic growth, kind of like what you were just talking about, as you have a particular segment and then you kind of grow from where you are and expand the base that you have with your customer base. So I think there's a lot of different angles when you talk about growth and how to achieve that.
And in companies like, IBM or also IOHK, which are more B2B, I mean, in a company like IBM, I mean, basically everybody knows, I mean, since I was a child, my first computer was an IBM when I was a kid, probably when I was about, I don't know, 6 or 7. My grandfather actually bought us an IBM when we were kids.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, so it was like I have to remember,
the
remember what.
XT or something like that, IBM XT maybe, or
Yeah, even before that, I think. Even before
wow.
that, like, yeah, yeah. My brother learned coding. For me, it was like too boring. I wanted to play outside, so I did computers to be much faster before I went into that. It was
Yeah,
too
right.
slow. It was even before the internet. I did learn some basic, but it was too slow for me back then. Yeah. So, but I mean, for companies like IBM, I mean, it's a brand that everybody knows, even people that are not in the industry. So how do you go about marketing, I mean, a brand like that? Is it mostly just through sales and partnerships, or like what type of activities can you do to promote a brand like that?
Well, like you said, I mean, it's a brand that's been around 100 plus years. And I think one of the important things and it's $1 billion brand that, as I worked there, we had to be very careful how we protect that brand. But I think as we start to talk about emerging technologies, it's interesting how you can take one brand that, in your mind, we're just talking about PCs, but it's also quantum computing. It's also at one time blockchain. It was also industry. I mean, we've worked in the weather. The weather company was part of IBM. So you have all these different industries and technology. And I think it really comes down to positioning, right? How do you position your company so that as you kind of expand the different growth opportunities, it all makes sense, right? And there's also certainly different themes that you want to drive around. Certainly, in the case of IBM, it's all around technology for businesses. But whether you look at companies like Yeti, started out as a cooler, they've expanded into cups and a variety of different things that all sort of reinforce this brand of being an outdoors person and enjoying nature. So, and quality. I mean, these are certain brand and positioning attributes that you want to foster. And as you do your growth strategy, how do you leverage that brand to reinforce your growth and your innovation?
Mm-hmm. And in an industry, I mean, like blockchain, I mean, besides like being an emerging industry, it's also, I mean, there's also a lot of question of trust there, I guess, because it's so new and there was all this hype around crypto and all that. So in that space, it's probably also difficult to differentiate yourself and to gain trust and all that, right?
Certainly. I mean, I think in any emerging market, you have to keep an eye on regulations around emerging trends. But I think it all comes back to staying close to your customer. What do they want? What is the focus area that they need? And, finding those gaps that allow you to drive some new innovation. So, but on the other hand, if you go back to Steve Jobs, he had this famous quote that said, our job is to figure out what customers want before they know what they want. So before they do it. So, and I think this is where the interesting thing about innovative growth strategies is it's a bit of an art in addition to a science. Which remembered Innovator's Dilemma, Christensen's book, it's very difficult because you have an existing product set that perhaps is making money or is a cash cow. How do you have that courage to go out and try something new that could potentially cannibalize your existing product set? And I think that's where, this notion of innovative strategies are both a process and a set of techniques, but also an art and almost culture to some extent.
And in the blockchain industry, especially in B2B, I mean, what uses are companies doing in blockchain these days? I mean, is it limited to fintech or is it in other industries as well?
I mean, there's a lot of variety of different use cases for blockchain. I know at IBM we used At one time, supply chain was a big use case. Food safety, figure out the provenance of food. If there was a potential contaminated food product, say you're in the agricultural and some strawberries were contaminated for some reason, instead of wiping out the entire crop, having some sort of supply provenance of where did that particular batch come from, and is it isolated to that batch? And technology like blockchain can be very helpful in that regard. So I think there's a lot of different use cases, but I think it's an emerging space too.
Oh, but I mean, just because you mentioned Steve Jobs and his quote about identifying what customers want before they identify that. It seems to me like in blockchain, it's pretty much that. No, I mean, there's many uses for blockchain, but it's not necessarily that companies know how to use that or that they even need it. No.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the case in any sort of emerging technology. That there's always new areas to explore, and it's a learning process, learning curve.
And so is it a challenge to market anything in that industry?
The interesting thing about the blockchain industry is very much community centric. I mean, working with communities, particularly in a decentralized environment. So, I mean, there's a variety of different ways of going about marketing in the blockchain space.
So, and any interesting ideas of how to implement these growth strategies? I mean, if it's really about communities, so do you necessarily have to go through communities, or do you use other channels as well?
Well, I think in general with, how do you, from a company standpoint, how do you drive a growth strategy? I think it starts from the top and works its way down, but it's also an entire organizational focus. So continuous learning is an important part, being aware of what's the market trends, building a good network and community, understand what are the directions of the industry that you're in, looking at the data, what is the customers telling you. But I think there's one of the big things I think is a cultural aspect of this within an organization. How do you need to be able to make sure that you enable a culture that allows employees to try new things, and if things don't work out or they fail, that the culture reinforces this notion of experimentation. And so I think that's one of the big, takeaways for me in my career when I've observed successful innovation projects. It really comes down to, does the leadership allow for experimentation, and as a result of that, failure? Things just don't work out and you try something new. So I think that's kind of one of the big takeaways for me.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I can tell you also about our company and in general. I mean, I read a post on LinkedIn by one of the marketing leaders on Gong.io, if you know them. They're a big company in the sales space. And it was about building a brand and so on, but it was also a lot about marketing. And he said that you have to experiment all the time. You have to try new things. And I'm a big believer in that. And I can tell you that also in our company, I often tell, colleagues and employees, I tell them, when you build marketing products or when you work on your own marketing, I separate between the activities that you do that are, like recurring, like you have something that works and you keep on working on that. So that's like you know what to expect, and that's basically just delivery, But then you have to experiment quite a lot and you have to try new things. And the best way that I found that really helps people with that process is that when they consider what they're doing an experiment, they officially call it an experiment, where because it's an experiment, they're allowed to fail. It's not just that they're allowed to fail. It's just that the principle is that you want to learn, and you want to learn as quickly as possible, and you want the experiment to be inexpensive. So you don't spend, a lot of time, resources, money, etc., on something that you don't know if it's going to work or not. Okay. So once they have that, once they're in that state of mind where what they're doing is an experiment and it's very likely to fail, they feel much safer to experiment. And then they try new things. And then that creates, really like an environment where you can really like innovate and create new things. if you do too much of it, then you don't go anywhere because you're just experimenting all the time. So the idea is really like to identify those places where you do have an impact and double down on the things that work. But we do quite a lot of that, especially in the marketing department.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the core tenets of, I mean, it's a really good point that you brought up. It's a core tenet of kind of the growth marketing, growth hacking mindset, which is defining the experiment up front. What do you expect to get? And if the outcome is this, then that tells us something. And the outcome is that tells us something. And so having that insight up, that thought process up front will drive that insight that's much more tangible, right? And like you said, move fast, fail fast, move forward quickly, and learn from it.
Yeah, I often tell people, it's like I like to make a lot of mess before I start like organizing things, because when you're in uncharted territory, you don't always necessarily know exactly where you're going. I can give you an example, like when ChatGPT came out, I told you before we started, like I was obsessed with that, and because I would think, it's just a matter of time before Google changes the snippet basically in the search results.
Yes.
With a ChatGPT, like, chat that answers your questions. And I mean, we started really like researching that and trying to figure out how it's going to change search, because it's not just about how you create content. It's really about how search is going to change, because most of the traffic on the internet, I mean, Google has more traffic than all social networks combined. It's like really a lot of traffic. Even though now with TikTok, Facebook and Instagram, but mostly TikTok is like chewing away a lot of Google's traffic. But still, it's really about how Google's going to change. And we researched that quite a lot, and we try to understand how that's going to affect our business and how we can adapt to that. And I can tell you that's why I told you that it's been a year and a half since ChatGPT launched, because it's been like really like we reformed the company because of that. It was really transformative time for us. And because of that, we went into a completely different direction than most of the market, where everybody is obsessed with creating content with AI. We said, okay, what people care about is, I mean, people like videos on social media, and they basically like any type of video. There's a high demand, an increasing demand for every type of video, short, long, mobile, web, TV, everything. But then people like video, and people like to see other people, and they want to see what other people think.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, with AI, if AI can provide the answer, if ChatGPT or Bard can answer my questions, why should I take the answers from ChatGPT, put them on my website for Google to index them? So when you search Google, you're going to go to what ChatGPT said. I mean, it's easier to just ask ChatGPT. So we really like define what type of content ChatGPT can, or what type of queries ChatGPT or Bard can answer very well, and what other type of queries they can. And we went through this like really transformative process of like reinventing the company and reinventing the way we do content. And today we use AI a lot in the strategy part of like deciding what content to create and how this content should be created and how it should look like. And then also in editing the content, but not in generating the content. I mean, we figured out that if you generate content with AI, you're creating content that's closer and closer to what the machine can create. I mean, you are using the machine, but even if you use tools like Phrase.io or, tools that help you create content in a specific way, it forces you or it funnels you to create content that's more and more like the machine. And it's content that we believe that Google is going to like less and less, But it's like, because it's going to want to show content that's more unique, more human, because that's what people consume. That's what people want to consume mostly. And if not, then they can find it on ChatGPT and Bard. Google doesn't need to index that content. So it really helped us to transform the company and make it more and more up to date and relevant in such a fast changing environment.
How do you so you use AI to generate the ideas and sort of clean it up or augment it, but you do your team does the writing of the content? Humans?
So what we do, I mean, first of all, we use AI in a different way. What we do is we built a kind of like an upside model of Google. So we've learned from how Google indexes websites and how Google mostly like ranks content. And there's thousands of different factors, right? But when you want to like simplify it, because we don't have the same manpower like Google, so we can't build like a real upside down model, but we can build an estimate of that. And the main thing that Google looks at, besides like other factors, but the main thing is topic and authority. When you have an authority of a certain topic, you're much more likely to rank for it. Whereas if you don't have an authority, okay, so just like if you meet a, I don't know, like a PhD and you ask them a question and they can answer with a lot of authority because it's their field, or if you ask me and I know nothing about that, but even if I copied from that PhD, their exact answer, and I would tell you the same answer they said, exactly the same answer, you would still trust the PhD much more than than me because I have no authority in that field.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much the same. You have to build authority. So if you want to engineer that, so what does it mean to have authority? Eventually and that's exactly what Google is doing. So what does it mean to have authority? It means that you need to be able to conquer, so to speak, all those topics that make up your authority. Okay, so if you're an authority in blockchain, you need to be able to have like a very deep understanding and share it as content about every topic that pertains to the blockchain. And since most of quite a lot of the content is created by companies, especially for SEO, social media is a different story, but SEO is created by companies, and companies often have a goal of, if you're selling shoes, then it doesn't matter what content you create, it should eventually lead to shoes. Okay, like eventually the bottom of the funnel is best shoes for women, best shoes for men, etc. Mm-hmm. So you want to be able to map all the topics that are relevant to that. So we use AI to map all the relevant topics in an industry and really score those topics according to how relevant they are to the business and how much value they have. So we use AI for that. And then for every topic that we map, we find the expert that can share unique content, just like the content that you consume more like on social media, on YouTube or TikTok, where it's like informative and interesting, and where you can share like unique perspectives, unique opinions, experiences, expertise. And that makes the content much more unique. And then we use AI in editing that content. But we don't work with writers anymore. We work only with experts, and we're looking for that those unique perspectives. You understand?
Gotcha. No, that's really cool. It's great. Makes no sense.
And the process of building that is exactly what you mentioned, like being able to experiment, not being afraid to fail, because we failed quite a lot until this crystallized. You understand?
Well, I think that's a really good strategy because one of the things I often wonder about with this AI, when you project the industry out several years, you've ever heard of this notion of an ecosystem collapse? Like if you have a closed environment and nothing goes in and out, organisms in there will basically interbreed and there won't be enough diversity, and then the organisms will just die off. We could eventually get to that here in the internet, right? Where everything becomes AI generated and the AI generated content gets consumed by the AI. So you have this loop where there's no, or at least the major content is not unique. It's all.
Yeah, that's exactly that. It's model collapse. People, I'm not sure if everybody is really like, it's easy to grasp even, because just having AI create content for people, it's basically creating content for search, because that's how you find the information, mostly through search or discovery, which is like more social media. But if we talk about Google and SEO and search, if you replace human content with AI content all across the internet, it's basically equivalent to TikTok or Instagram replacing all of the crowdsourced content that they have there, which is created by people, with AI, because you can create AI people now speaking,
That's
eating,
right.
whatever. And if Instagram decided one day, okay, they don't need you anymore, they don't need me anymore, they can create their own photos of breakfasts and landscapes and kids playing and whatnot. The day they do it, they're going to disappear. They're not going to even, probably they're not going to even imagine doing it. Maybe they can create a channel that does it, that creates special things, but they could replace all of us with just, AI content, but that would mean the death of the platform. So that's really similar to what would happen if Google started to answer all the questions with Bard. People would stop searching. And it's not just that, it's also, when you think about it, it's basically three principles for Google. The first one is they need to provide the best results, the best search results on the internet. You're not married to them. If ChatGPT provides better results, you're going to move to ChatGPT, right? And the second thing, they need to make money, so ads must work on that. So the concept of clicking on something when you search is part of showing ads they want you to click. And the ads should be very similar to the results so that you feel more confident clicking the ads. And you can see how Google has improved over the years. But the third principle, which is, I mean, that's just my opinion because I don't work at Google and nobody told me this, but that's what I believe. I think the first principle is as important as the first two, and it is that Google must send traffic to the internet. If Google stops sending traffic to the internet will stop creating content for Google. And just like when you upload a photo to Instagram or a video, it's just like when you create content for your website. Content for the website is content for Google, just like where photos for your profile on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram is content for Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, okay? So if Google stops sending traffic to the internet, it's equivalent to social media stopping sending traffic to your profile or stopping to show you on the social platforms, and then you would stop creating content there, okay? Which is, by the way, what happened on Facebook, because back in the day, if you had a business page on Facebook, you know, a fan page, it used to be called, you would create content there, it would be shown to everyone. And then one day, you know, Facebook said, okay, if you want your fan page, if you want your business page to reach people, you have to pay for that. They changed the algorithm and your business content stopped surfacing in people's feed unless you paid for it. And businesses just stopped creating content for Facebook. Almost entirely. The content created by businesses to Facebook is just, you know, it almost stopped entirely. They do create some content. If you check business pages on Facebook, you see they create some content, but it's not comparable to what they used to before that change that happened. So it's very similar, and I think Google understands it very, very well. That's why they're taking their time with SGE, with that experiment, before they roll it out to everyone. And they're measuring that metric, because if they stop sending traffic to the internet, or if they decrease it, that's the model collapse that you're mentioning. You know, there's gonna be no new blood. It's a kind of an incest. You know, there's like no gene coming in, and it would mean the death of Google in a way. It could mean, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can see sometimes in verticals, like, for example, forecast, where they don't need anyone to create content because they can get the information. They can go straight to the source. They can get the information from weather.com, for example, through an API, and there they can just show their own forecast. There are search results under the forecast that Google shows you, but you probably never click on them. You just see, if you Google forecast, you know, if you go to Google for the forecast, you just trust what they show you. Don't click on any one of the results, probably. So in places where you can really like structure the content and have a result that's like auto-generated, like forecast, then in those instances, Google doesn't need us. You know, it can create its own content. But so that's why you need to define what content is still relevant and what content the machine can create.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're creating content with a machine, then you're falling closer and closer to those categories where the machine can create the content. So you're less and less needed. So that's not the place to go. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting times. There's a lot to think about.
You can see that also quite a lot in terms of you know, there's a lot of stress of how to use AI and all that. But another interesting point about that is you can see, just like if you take Google Docs, for example, you know, if I use Google Docs, it doesn't give me any unique edge over what you can do with Google Docs, because that's the playing field. You can do more or less like the same things that I can do. Okay. But if you can use Google Docs in a crazy and unique way, you can create crazy and unique stuff. And that's the way to think about AI, in my opinion, because you can see people creating amazing content with AI, but when you see that content, you say, wow, you know, I couldn't create that. You know, they create content in a completely unique way that I couldn't even imagine. It's just like, you know, when Pink Floyd started to create content like digital music, and people told them, you know, it's not music, it's digital. And they said, okay, let's see you create that type of music, you know. And to this day, I mean, I can't, you know, so it's really not about the tools, it's how you play them. So it's how you play with AI, you know.
Yeah. Do you think that this prompt engineering is going to be kind of the main way by which we kind of drive uniqueness in the AI space?
I'm not sure if it's really through prompts. I mean, prompts are part of it. I think it's going to improve quite a lot. I remember back in the day with Google even, developers, I work a lot with developers. My brother is a developer. So I remember back in the day where I couldn't find something on Google, I would ask my brother and he would know how to prompt Google, how to write the query in the right way to get Google to find the answer. Today, Google is so effective. So for most searches, everyone can find them, unless it's a very complicated search, and then it's more difficult for people. So I think prompts will evolve, probably much faster than Google. In probably a couple of years, it's going to be much easier to write prompts. But still, you can see very creative videos that people are creating with AI, whether it's because they can film themselves and edit it in a very special way, special effects that they can create, like really Hollywood level stuff that people can create on their own. And that's really the revolution where the power is going back to the people. I mean, if, I don't know, even 5 years ago or 10 or 20 years ago, if you wanted to create a very good video, you needed to have a budget. Okay. Today, if you're talented and you have the patience and the tools, and most of them are almost free, or some of them are free, you can create amazing content by yourself, if that's what you're into. And I mean, on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you see individuals creating amazing content. And it's more difficult for brands to keep up than it is for individuals to create content. So I think that's where the real revolution is. And that's where people don't necessarily look right now. It's not about how you use ChatGPT to write the article. It's not interesting. Everybody can do it. It's really about how you can create very, very unique content that's very interesting and engaging. And that hasn't changed, okay? I mean, it hasn't changed. It's like, to stand out, you always need to be that 1% on the 0.0.1% to stand out. It's impossible for everyone to stand out. If everybody writes content with ChatGPT, no one stands out. It's what you can do that's very different, that's very unique. And that's what it is about marketing.
So what you're saying is, in a sense, that, if you look at the population of the world, there may be somebody out there who has a really great idea, but could never do it because they didn't have the interest or wherewithal or time to become a developer or a film editor, or have to wait, or contacts to get into the Hollywood or whatever. But with these tools, they could just do it themselves.
Yeah, and that
you're unlocking creativity that's kind of locked up and nascent in individuals.
Yeah, and that's what you're seeing now. That's what you're seeing on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube. I mean, you're seeing individuals creating content that's just outstanding, that's just super interesting, and you see creative stuff. And another manifestation of that is, I remember when I was a kid, there was one TV channel, okay? Mm-hmm. And then there started to be like a few other TV channels, and then there was cable. And then the internet came, and then, and today it's like you have cable, and you have Netflix and Hulu and HBO and so on. And then you have all of social media, and within every social media platform, you have different channels. So there's like a huge diversity of different types of content you can consume. And it's really about those creators, because also they have those channels where they can reach people, It's really about how they can create unique things. Sometimes unique can be simple text, but done in a very smart way, and people are still doing that. Sometimes it's just politics. It's just political. Trump tweets something, it can reach millions of people just because it's him. It doesn't have to be like the content is not necessarily like done with a lot of tech or smarts or whatever. It just reaches a lot of people. And sometimes it's just, all those effects that you can do with, even editing for free on CapCut, things like that.
I think one of the interesting things to watch in this, and we've seen this play out in previous technology revolutions, is, so in your example that, anybody can now create almost a Hollywood quality film. In Hollywood, when they release a film, there's a rating associated with it. It's PG or PG-13 or R or even X. When you start giving that, the ability to produce something and it goes out to the public, it has gone through some regulatory evaluation of the content. As you start to get into this AI where you can basically create almost anything, what kind of things, there'll be positive and very negative things that become created in that world. So
I'm in Israel, so we're experiencing that right now. I mean, I don't want to go too much into politics, but there's, for every one Jewish person in the world, there's 100 Muslims.
Yep.
That's basically the ratio, 1 to 100. Okay, I think maybe no 1 to, it's like 15 million Jewish people and probably 1.5 billion, 2 billion Muslims. So it's 1 in 100. And what's happening now on social media, and it's quite crazy, and you see that also in the States and in universities and places like that, a lot of fake news,
yes.
A lot of lies are being propagated.
And you've got deep fakes where you don't even know who the people are, right?
Yeah, you don't even need to deep fake. It's like people just, sometimes I see photos from Afghanistan as if they're from Gaza, or just, like fake stuff. I mean, after people were like, brutally murdered here, you see like videos of people saying that it was all a lie, that nothing happened. So you see things. Even my grandparents in Europe, during the Holocaust, it's pretty much like the stories that they mentioned there. So it's, in a way, there's a huge issue with trust, which basically takes you back to what we just discussed before. It's not just about creating content with AI. It's like for brands to establish trust, because eventually, how would you know if what you're consuming is reliable, trustworthy, etc.? It's going to be more and more about the brand, more about consuming content from platforms that you can trust, from accounts that you can trust. And I think that will eventually change social media, because now, if you saw Sacha Baron Cohen, the guy from Borat and Ali G and all that, he spoke about, he's a smart guy, and he spoke about Facebook being like the biggest propaganda machine in history, And on Facebook, they allow bots, on Facebook. They know that, I don't know, like what's the percentage of bots on Facebook, but they only block bots if they're involved in organized campaigns. If it's like a fake campaign organized by a group of bots, only then they block them. But if it's just a bot saying like, good morning, you're like asking what you had for breakfast, that's allowed. And that does not contribute a lot to trust on those platforms, where you don't know if the person you're speaking to, if they're a real person or not. And I think what people are going to prefer more and more is they're going to prefer to know if you're a real person or not, because in some instances, it's cool for you to to communicate with a bot. Like even when you play a game on your phone, you're playing against, maybe it's not against anyone, but you're playing with a bot. You're not communicating with a person. That's fine. You chose to do that. So maybe there's going to be places where you can chat with a bot where you know it's a bot, it's cool. But if you're chatting to another person and you're expecting them to be a person, you want to be sure that they're a person. So the platforms themselves will have to be more strict, I think, when it comes to forcing people to submit proof that that's their real identity, and making sure that the content that they share is reliable and so on. Otherwise, people will migrate to platforms where they feel most safe, naturally.
Yeah, it goes back to your point about authority, right?
Yeah.
Being able to define that and recognize and demonstrate that.
And you can see that quite a lot. I mean, regardless of the platform you're on, because everybody is on more than one social platform on average. I mean, so regardless if that's like YouTube, or if you just go through search and you go to websites, or if it's TikTok or Instagram, there are certain accounts that you follow. Maybe some of them are your friends, and some of them are like opinion leaders and thought leaders and so on. When you follow these people, you follow them because you like what they're saying, because you connect with it, because you trust them, because you feel like you can learn from them. And that has to do with their brand. That has to do with their authority. And so those people who can still create trust will have a lot of advantage compared to people who can't,
Yeah. Sure. Very interesting times. Sure.
Okay, Dirk, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting conversation.
That's been great.
So hope to see you again.
Yeah, sounds good.